All right, everybody, welcome back. My name is Oliver. This is episode 2 of Oliver's Show, and on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about startup businesses and my own personal attempt at starting up a business. I'm very interested in business, the stock market, and anything related to finances, so I thought this would be a good topic. I've always wanted to be like a startup business owner. So here's my experience of trying to start up a lawn care company after my first year of university. So I'm going to take you back to my first year. I'm just starting out engineering school and I'm obsessed with the idea of working for myself when I graduate. And I still am. I still would love to have my own businesses and run a startup when I graduate. But in first year, I was especially obsessed with this idea. So, that being the case, I decided that I'm going to go to every startup event that I can think of. I'm going to go to talk to startup owners. I'm going to do whatever I can to get in the startup scene. And there was this incubator on my campus, this startup incubator. So I would go to all of their events. I met all the people. I got to know everyone. And I ended up pitching at some pitch competitions. I think I did 2 pitch competitions through my first year. And one of them was just some crazy product, like some flying drone thing for OPG, Ontario Power Generation. And there was another pitch that I did, which I can't entirely remember at this moment in time. Maybe it was just the one. Anyway, point being that I really wanted to be a startup owner, and I really thought that like the startup scene was super, super cool. And I still do think it's really cool. Anyway, so first year comes around. I'm just hanging out. I'm first year engineering. By the time second term comes, I'm kind of realizing that I wanted to work during the summer, but I wasn't really able to find a co op position, which a lot of my peers were. Co op is like the word for an internship, essentially. Um, so what I decided to do instead, while I was like telling everyone about all this, like these problems I was having with finding a co-op, my girlfriend actually brought to my attention this thing run by the government of my province, Ontario, called Summer Company Program. And essentially, what it was they would give you a grant if you applied with their business plan, and they would mentor you and all of this stuff. So I thought it would be really cool to be able to get that grant because it was $3,000, which was quite a lot considering I had $0 at that point in time. Um, so yeah, I ended up writing the business plan instead of studying for my math exams, and I sent off my business plan to them. But at the moment that I was writing the business plan, I realized that like the business plan I'm writing is actually pretty good. Like I have a lot of stuff here because it was really in depth. It took me like days of researching market analysis, like a marketing plan. I had to come up with plans for like websites, marketing, branding, yada, yada, yada. I came up with all of this stuff and then I sent it off. And in my mind, it was like, well, it'll be a waste if they tell me no. So I'm just gonna go and do it anyway, even though like it doesn't really like if they say yes or not, it doesn't make a difference to me. I'm gonna go and do this because this is what I want to do. So that being the case, I decided that I'm gonna do it. So as soon as exams were over, I got to work on my lawn care business, and the first 2 things that I decided to do was one, I decided that I'm gonna do like an all electric and like a green lawn care business with zero emissions. So in order for that to happen, I decided that I would build a trailer and attach it to the back of my bicycle. And when I say trailer, this thing was not small. It was like 7 feet by 4 feet with like 6 inch to 1 foot walls, depending on the side of the trailer. And it was tough. Like I building and engineering this thing was crazy. Like I sourced the wheels on Kijiji, which is like Canadian Craigslist, and it was crazy. And I like we built. Well, my mom obviously helped me because I would be the person I am without my mom. So I built these rails, and like we like threw the wheels on the rails, and then I had like the bed of the trailer, and you could fit like a lawnmower, a weed whacker, a bunch of like bags. You could probably fit like one and a half full size lawnmowers in there, maybe two depending on the brand of the lawnmower. But it was a pretty dang big trailer, and it took me probably over a month of just like engineering and working on this thing. And it didn't help that I would get discouraged at some points too, and it would just kind of sit there for like a couple days at a time while I tried to think over what the heck to do with this thing or whether or not this was a good idea. Um, but yeah, anyway, so I decided to build this crazy trailer, and in the meantime, I was doing other things for the business. I taught myself how to code in HTML and CSS, and I decided that I don't have any money. I'm not going to pay someone to build a website. I'm not going to pay any of these website builders to build a website. So I'm just going to do it by myself. And that's what I did. I learned how to code in HTML and CSS. It was a really crappy little website, but it worked. I like bought the domain name, I had it up and running, and I like registered my business with like Google Business and my business hours and all of this stuff. So I really like went deep into this thing, and on top of doing that, I also started working on my marketing promotions. So I went out and I created a logo for myself. I printed some business cards. Like I purchased some business cards. In hindsight, I probably could have just like bought some thick paper and printed it, and it might have been cheaper because I had a lot of time on my hands. And anyway, it doesn't matter. So I printed these business cards and I started going door to door, and I started handing out my business cards to people. Keep in mind, I still had no equipment at this time, and I still didn't know if I was going to get this grant or not. They had like accepted me into the program, but there was an issue with the funding, funnily enough. So at the time, I was just going in occasional like business mentoring, like let's work on your business plan, and like here's an expert in like online marketing and yada yada. And like I appreciated the help obviously, but there was a lot of like, and there was a lot of really useful information. Like I got a great book on building a business plan and things like that. But I don't think that that type of stuff really compares to physically going to people door to door trying to sell your services. It's just not the same. You could build a million business plans, but if you're not out there and actually like trying to get the customers to come in, you don't know what it's like. So, anyway, going door to door, trying to sell like this business plan, pitching my pitch to people, lawn care, trying to give them quotes on each of my business cards. I would write a quote on the back. And I waited a few days, and eventually people started calling me. So it was at this point that I asked my mom for money because I still didn't have funding. So I was like, Mom, I want to buy this lawnmower and this weed whacker for $600. Can you send me $600? And believe it or not, she actually sent me $600. I promised her to pay it back, and I'll tell you how that ended a bit later. But I did. I promised her to pay her back, and so she gave me $600. I went to Home Depot. I bought this stuff, loaded it into the car, took it home the next day, went to my first job, which I quoted at $10. And in hindsight, that was not a great idea because this first job ended up taking me an hour and a half to complete, and I only made $10 off of it. But it was like the most exciting $10 I had ever made because I basically created that $10 from like nothing, right? I had nothing. I just had an idea and I went door to door, and somebody was like, "Here you go. $10 for your suffering and pain." And I was like, oh my God, like this is real. Like I can make money doing this. So anyway, I continued throughout the next couple weeks. I kept going door to door, kept handing out my business cards, kept like getting calls back from people, and I started going around and working. And I would like walk around with this bike trailer because at the time I had no mechanism to attach it to my bike. So I just walked this massive trailer around my neighborhood. And occasionally I ended up driving my mom's car to jobs because this bike trailer was just not maintainable. Um, like I could not take it probably like more than a kilometer away because that would take me more than like 15 minutes to walk. Plus, carrying all this shit was really, really heavy. So I ended up using the car, which made me realize at the time that the bike trailer was a huge waste of time. And I probably could have put that time and money to better use by just leasing a truck or anything else that would have made more sense. Because at the time I was so set on this idea of green lawn care, but it just didn't end up working like the way I expected it to. And hindsight's 2020. So what can you do about that? At least I know now that if I ever want to reboot my lawn care business that I'm buying a truck. You need a truck. And if you don't have the money for a truck, go work for someone else, save up some money and get a truck. It makes so much sense to get a truck. And I'll tell you why in a second. I had quite some interesting experiences just because I didn't have the equipment that I needed to do something like this. All right, so continuing here with my lawn care business story. So, as I was getting these calls from people, I started like talking to people. I would like, there was one person that I went up to them on their lawn and they didn't end up being a customer, but they ended up sending an email. They were a real estate agent, so they knew a bunch of people in the neighborhood and ended up sending an email to probably 10 or 15 people. Only one person got back to me, but that one person was my biggest customer of the summer. And that one job was the most hellish job of my summer, too. So let me talk about that story. So I go up to this guy who's gardening and I tell him about my business. He's like, "Oh, that's super cool. Like, I would love to help you out. I do my own gardening, but maybe I know someone." And then he sends the email. Someone responds back. I respond back and he's like, "Let's meet up." So I go over to his house, say hi. I give him a quote for cutting grass and he's like, "Hey, how about you replace the sod in my backyard? It's overgrown. There's a lot of weeds. And can you do that?" And me being the naive person that I was, I said yes because I would say yes to anything at that time because I wanted to make money. So I come home and I tell my mom, and she says, "Oh boy, you are in for a treat. Replacing sod is going to take a really long time. I don't know if you know what you signed up for." And I said to my mom, "You know what? I don't. It doesn't matter what I signed up for because I'm going to figure out a way to do it and I'm going to make it happen." So, what ended up happening, I went to this gardening center and they had shipments of sod. So I ordered some sod. It was like, I don't know, I think I quoted my customer like $1,200 to replace the backyard. And I ended up paying like 600 ish for materials, another like couple hundred for labor, another like it was, anyway, I didn't end up making that much money from the job. But it was just a hellish job. So I got triple mix and I got sod from this gardening center and I had them ship these like materials to the guy's house and I'm like waiting here at my house cuz his was like just a couple streets down. So I'm waiting here at my house and just waiting for this phone call from the sod company when they said they would deliver. And the guy was like, "Oh, like I'm here at the house." And I put it under my own name. So he was just getting ready to dump this triple mix all over the driveway. So I grabbed a tarp from my basement, ran over there, laid the tarp on the driveway, and he dumped it. And it like half of it misses the tarp. And it was just, oh man. Anyway, so it was just awful. And then the sod comes later on that day. The sod gets dumped. And the day that the sod got dumped was the day that I started working. So I asked one of my friends from high school if he wanted to come, and I would pay him $100 for like 4 hours or 5 hours. I don't remember. Um, so I, I invited him to come and join me. And so I had watched some YouTube videos and educated myself on how to replace sod, and I was thinking about all the different like things that I would have to do. A sod cutter would have been helpful to like cut up the old grass and just like throw it out, and then you could like get rid of any extra dirt that you didn't want. But me being the smart aleck that I was, I decided that I would rather save the money, which didn't end up saving me any money at all. It actually ended up costing me more. I decided to save the money on renting one of these things and decided that I would use a shovel with me and my friend to dig up this backyard. We get to work and we're taking barrels of this stuff out to the front yard and just like digging it up, throwing it like into a new pile. And it was awful. Like we probably spent like 3 or 4 hours just digging up this grass and it was the worst thing that I have ever done. And then my friend had to go. So my friend's gone and I'm still digging by myself. And at this point, it's probably like 5 p.m. Like I'd probably been there for an extra 4 hours on top of what my friend had done. And my mom was like, "Hey, do you need help?" I think me and my friend actually were able to start laying the sod, but then it was just me. And sod is heavy. One roll of sod is so heavy because they have to like keep it moist and for it not to die. And it was brutal. So I had this like sod and I threw it down and it was like I was trying to like roll it out and I also didn't have a sod roller And when I went back to cut the grass, like for the rest of the summer, I kept noticing these like very small inconsistencies that would have been fixed with a sod roller. And honestly, I'm kind of impressed that this guy trusted me enough. Like, I obviously wanted to do like the best possible job that I could. And I'm really happy that someone actually like gave me the chance to try this for myself. So I knew that it wasn't for me. Um, but it was very, very like difficult. And I think at the end of the day, we did like a really good job. Like by the end of the summer, the grass was looking amazing, and I was really proud of it and all of like the work that I had done to take care of it. And I continuously throughout like the end of the summer was pulling weeds around the perimeter because there was like a flower bed with a bunch of weeds. So I would just go in, continue to like pull these weeds out. Um, yeah, anyway. So day one, I'm like getting near the end of this day, and I call my mom and I'm like, Mom, please come help. So my mom and my sister both come to help me out to get rid of like the stuff to like whatever to roll the sod. So we roll the sod, and now there's just a pile of old dug up dirt in this guy's driveway. And I I didn't think it through. It never occurred to me that I would have to find a place to dispose of this stuff. And going to the dump would have cost me, I think, like somewhere like $250 to get rid of this stuff. And that would have destroyed like all of, if any, like almost all of the profit that I would have made. So, what I ended up doing was renting a truck from Home Depot, loading the truck with this sod, like this clean fill, the stuff, the old sod, loading this truck with the old sod. By the time we got halfway through, the Home Depot truck was yelling at us. And I say us because my mom had to take the day off work to help me do this. So the truck was yelling at us. And like while we were loading the sod in, we only managed to get about half of it into the truck before it started telling us that it was like an overweighted load. I ended up finding some people on Kijiji again who like lived on farms and wanted some clean fill, as they call it. And I ended up going to the first place. It was like a half hour drive. Dumped this clean fill out of the truck, just me and my mom again, like shoveling it out onto like some random farmland in the middle of nowhere. And then we came back, did it all over again. And by the time we were done, I think it was like 4 or 5 p.m. And we ended up not being able to finish taking all of it. So we took the final third load and brought it to our own house and just dumped it underneath this pine tree and into the backyard. And it was just, oh man. It ended up taking, I think just that part alone took me and my mom combined probably like 15 hours to complete. And it was brutal. Anyway, so yeah, that whole thing, like that whole job probably took me like over 1 week. And this was one job, and it paid a lot. Like it gave me a lot of revenue, but the profit that I made from that revenue and the amount of time that it took was just abysmal. Like it was basically nothing. So yeah, that was a lesson learned. If you're gonna be trying to replace sod, you need to know what the heck you're doing. And you can do it when you don't know what you're doing, but it will take you forever. And it probably won't look as amazing as it would if someone else did it. Like I have pictures of it and it looks great. Like you can't tell that it was done by like a total noob. And the grass, as far as I know, is still alive and doing well. So I'm really proud of being able to do a good job. But the amount of effort that it took me to do that good job with zero experience was very, very, very painful. So that is probably like the biggest customer of my summer. I continued to go to his house for the rest of the summer. He continued to pay me like bi-weekly. I was like cutting his grass. I gave him like weekly discounts, and it was just like after that it was all like rainbows and sunshine. But that one job like demotivated me for pretty much like a good month of the summer, and I only had 4 months in the summer. So I was just demotivated. After that, I did not want to do this anymore. It was tough. But anyway, I ended up continuing to like go to jobs, and people continued to refer me. I had like a referral program, and I ended up continuing to cut people's lawns. I did a couple overgrown things. I ended up cutting down some guys like birch tree with one of those, I don't know what they're called, but it's like those automatic saws. It's not even a chainsaw. It was one of those like automatic saws that you just use to like cut through like a 2x4. Um, and it didn't work. It's like a sawzall. I don't know what it's called, but I call it a sawzall. And yeah, it wasn't really able to cut through the trunk of this. It was kind of like a shrub. And anyway, so didn't really do a great job there either. And I basically turned myself into an arborist. I had no idea what I was doing with this, but it was like I learned so much about taking care of lawns and stuff that now I honestly would feel very confident in maintaining my own yard if I like get one eventually someday. And like it was a great experience, but wow, was it ever tough. And all of the other jobs combined, I think ended up making me just about as much revenue as the one job that I did for laying the sod. But yeah, it was really, 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 really tough. So, chapter 3 of this incredible story that I'm telling you about my business is some unfortunately rude customers that I had to deal with. So, and another customer that I had to deal with, which I kind of just got scared because their lawn was way too big. So we'll start with the unfortunate customer. So I had this one customer who I quoted what I thought was like a very good price, but him and his friend were kind of like negotiating. His friend was negotiating on behalf of him to me, and I found like their price to be unreasonable for the size of this guy's lawn. And then he kind of like agreed for me and then gave his friend a good price on my behalf, which didn't really make much sense. I think I kind of like the bed in the negotiating there, but anyway, that's my fault. But that still doesn't like help that at the end of the day, this guy was extremely rude. So I would go over, I like cut his lawn, yada yada, and then I would ask him for like payments, and every time that I would cut the lawn, there was always something that wasn't quite the way he wanted it, or he thought that I would be doing, like that I was also going to be removing this crazy, like basically these flowers he wanted me to just like completely like demolish and get rid of, but I didn't, like he never really relayed that properly to me. Anyway, there was a lot of like miscommunication going on, but at the end of the day, like everything evened out at the end of the day, but like at the time it seemed like the worst thing ever. Like I wasn't getting paid. I kept doing these lawns. He kept asking me to come back after not paying me. And it was just an unfortunate situation to be in with this guy. So I think after like 2 or 3 jobs, I just ended up like ditching him and I just didn't go back to him. Um, but he kept finding me around the neighborhood, which is kind of unfortunate because I worked in the neighborhood that I lived in, which now in hindsight, I also would not do again. I would try and separate my work life from my residential life. Um, but that's another thing, like another lesson learned, I guess. Yeah, anyway, so I would separate those two things if I was ever to do that again. But yeah, it was kind of weird because I would be like doing lawn care at someone else's place, and then he would literally find me, like go out of his way, driving around in his like Beamer, looking for me, and being like, "Hey, can you come and cut my grass?" And I said, "No, I don't want to because you're not going to pay me enough." And then he would leave, come back like 10 minutes later, ask again, and I was like, "No, I'm not doing it." Anyway, so that was a very weird customer client relationship. I think everyone's going to end up getting like one or two of these people. And I think like I probably could have handled that a little bit better by being more clear with what I wanted and using a contract. Um, because I ended up doing that after this customer. I ended up writing up a contract for any new customers, and the majority of them, at least the reasonable ones, were more than happy to sign it. So if the person's not willing to sign a contract that is reasonable for both parties, then they're probably not going to be reasonable to you, and you should move on and go find someone else and deny working for them because they'll just be a pain in your butt. So that's when I learned contracts were very important. I did write up a contract for my sod job because that was just something that I didn't want to get. Like, once I finished the job, I wanted to get my money. So I knew that I needed a contract for something that big. But for the littler jobs, it never really occurred to me to make a contract until I ran into this very troublesome customer. So moving forward now, I'm going to talk about another time. So I had this one customer who was very, very helpful. Like he would refer me to all of these places. And at one point, he referred me to this, like this couple who had a massive freaking lawn. It was huge. Their front and backyard was unbelievably huge. So they called me over. I go over there. I'm in my Honda Civic, and and they're like, and they say hi. I'm like hi, and they're like, oh, like where's the truck and the trailer? And I was like, it's at home. I just didn't bring it for the quote. And they were like, oh, okay, come like to the backyard and we'll like give us a quote for how much it would cost per month. And at that time I was doing like per cut, but they wanted it on a per month basis. And I think that for these types of people, a per month basis makes a lot more sense. I think they would have preferred to have it as like a monthly bill almost. And you just maintain it, looks beautiful all the time, and they pay you every month. So that's the way that they wanted to do it. And I think that's actually standard. But I only learned that once I went to them and like actually, met the people, met the customers. Um, yeah, anyway, so I go to the back and this lawn is huge. It's like the size of a soccer field. And I'm here, I just have my one battery powered push lawnmower and my weed whacker. And I I've never been like more shocked in my life. First off, that someone has a house that big, and second off, that I was there as like a representative of my own company and these people were willing to pay me. But anyway, so I did the math and it just made no sense for me to do that. They wanted me to like do some gardening too and basically like go to Home Depot, buy a bunch of flowers, plant the flowers for them. So I just didn't have that type of like money, and I didn't have the right equipment. I didn't have the truck. There was a lot of stuff that just wouldn't have made sense for me to do that because I would have had to rent a truck, and then I would have like that would have probably eaten into a bunch of my profits. Anyway, so at the end of the day, I ended up just like leaving there, and I wasn't able to give them a quote because I had my push lawnmower, and you needed one of those sitting down lawnmowers for this place. And I had a few other customers that also kind of like drove me insane. But I also like weirdly and kind of in a masochistic way enjoyed these jobs, but it was overgrown backyards. I don't know why, but just like murdering these plants that were like a foot tall, like this tall grass basically, was a lot of fun. Um, but getting paid very little for doing so much work was not a lot of fun because I ended up doing, there was a, like, it was a small backyard and it was overgrown as hell. And I think I got paid about like 20 bucks to do it. And I ended up with 3 or 4 bags of tall grass out in the front. And those bags, I think, like the cost of those 3 or 4 bags was about a quarter of the money that I made. So yeah, it was not a good sign. And then I did that again with a different customer because I was advertising myself on Kijiji Canadian Craigslist, and I was advertising rates as low as $20. And everyone called me and said, "Hey, can you cut my grass for $20? It's a small lawn." And I would say, "Yeah, sure, let me go check it out." I would go and check it out. It would be overgrown. I'd be like, "Okay, I'm going to charge you double because it's overgrown." And they'd be like, "No, no, 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 no." And then I would be like, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." And then eventually we would agree on their price because I was broke and I didn't know any better. um, yeah, so anyway, I ended up doing a couple of these jobs and I had to go back. Like, there was here's another problem with the equipment that I bought. Since I wanted to do this thing all electric, I continuously ran into the problem of my equipment running out of battery like midway through one of these big jobs. And that was the biggest annoyance ever because if I had gotten gas powered stuff, then I wouldn't have had to worry about this. Could just dump some more fuel in and continued going with this thing like burning at like 80 degrees Celsius or something, and I could have just kept going, right? But no, I had these batteries. I ended up buying like a third battery and it still would die in the middle of these jobs and I wouldn't get them done. I'd have to go home, plug all of my batteries in, let them charge because they would take longer to charge than discharge. It took like 3 or 4 hours. And sometimes I would go back the same day. Sometimes I would go back the next day. wow, all of these problems that I didn't know I would be having, like really just kind of popped up. Like in hindsight, I would have done just a traditional lawn care, like screw, I'm sorry, but the environmental options are not great. Sure, maybe I could get a Tesla or something and that would save on the fuel. But even that, like if you're traveling hundreds of kilometers, miles per day from site to site, it might make more sense and save you some time and money to get from one site to another if you have a gas car. So Tesla is doing really, really amazing. And I'd say, like, even now, some of their cars are just as good as a gas car and can get you as far. You could charge it overnight. And I don't really see anyone needing to go more than like 500 kilometers in one day, in one working day, that is. Um, but yeah, so in hindsight, if I was to do it again, I would most definitely buy a truck and I would most definitely use gas equipment because the electric stuff just didn't work and it was a big pain in my butt. So once the summer was over, I ended up selling all of my equipment because I just didn't want to do it. And with the money that I got from selling the equipment, I was able to actually pay my mom back. She took a $50 loss, but I don't think that'll hurt her too badly. And yeah, it was really good. I think I did a great job. And at the end of the day, sometime in like November, these guys with the grant and like the business training ended up calling me and saying, "Oh, by the way, if you want your $3,000 now, you can get it." So, it was a really nice surprise at the end of the day to like come out of it ahead. And I did end up breaking even before the grant, but after the grant, it was just bonus and that felt amazing. Um, but yeah, it was a great time. I would do it again because of all the things that I learned from doing it the first time. I know exactly what types of things I would target. I know exactly what types of things I wouldn't waste my time on. I know exactly what types of things you should spend your money on. I know exactly what makes the most sense. I know I would be so much more efficient. And like people say, when I've seen these videos of people asking, like Kevin O'Leary, like if you had to start from zero again, would you be able to build your way up to how much wealth you have now? And they always say yes, but in half the time. And I completely understand that now because you like the amount of things that you'd learn from experience from doing this, it would give you the ability to do it in about half the time because you would avoid all of the stupid mistakes that you made at the start. So that was really cool. I'm really hoping to continue on kind of that trajectory and start another business eventually. Um, I don't really have any like big plans right now. I'm just trying to like grow audiences on the internet and I'm trying to do some other things, like some freelance stuff, web design. I'm trying to build my skills there. So hopefully, if I continue to build those skills, maybe I can branch it out into a small business. And yeah, that's kind of like the route in life that I hope to take. Of course, I would be more than happy to work for a company for a while because I know there is so much value to be had from working for somebody else first who knows what they're doing because you can learn so much from them in a small amount of time and it gives you the skills you need to build your own business. So I think if I was to start another business, I would look to get a mentor and I would look to work for someone else in the field first before starting the business. If I'm going to go into a different field other than lawn care, which as of right now, I'm in engineering. So, yeah, that is my plan. So, that's the story of my lawn care business and how wonderfully it went. I really hope that you guys were able to take away something from this, learn a thing or two, and maybe get inspired to start your own business. I can tell you that it's not glamorous. And in the first year, if you're able to make money, that's amazing. Like, it really is hard to go out there and put yourself out there and start a business and come out ahead at the end of the day. I can like seriously say congratulations to anyone who has been able to do it successfully and to make money in their first year. Those are two very impressive accomplishments. Thank you so much for listening to my show. I really hope that you enjoyed the story. It took me a little bit of thinking to come up with everything that had happened about 2 years ago, but it was a great time. I really enjoyed telling it, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed telling it. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, be sure to subscribe. It's free. You can always unsubscribe if you don't like it. Same goes for YouTube. And if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to drop me a like. Let me know in the comments what you think I should talk about next time, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.